This, as you know, is a collaborative human space mission run by Axiom, NASA, and our very own ISRO. In fact, Shubhanshu Shukla is representing ISRO on that mission. There are 4 crew members on board. The commander is Peggy Whitson. She's the director of human spaceflight for Axiom with 675 days of space experience. The pilot, as you know, is our very own Shubhanshu Shukla. He's an Indian Air Force pilot, an astronaut with ISRO, and he's going to be fundamental in India's journey to space, India's own journey to space through the Gaganyaan mission and everything else that ISRO is working on. There are 2 mission specialists on board. One of them is Slavoj Wisniewski, and he's of Poland, and you've also got Tibor Kapu of Hungary. What a progress that rocket is taking. It's the Dragon, of course, and it's on its way to the International Space Station. Now, once they reach space, as I point out, they will make it to ISS, which is the International Space Station, and they will spend as many as 14 days there conducting research on behalf of several members of the scientific community. There will be 60 research projects that are conducted, and remember, this is a rocket flight that has taken off after multiple delays. Everything had to be absolutely right, and this is the difference between the launch of a commercial satellite or anything else that is not crewed by humans into space and a mission that is run by humans. When there are humans on board, everything needs to be absolutely perfect. You need to have every element, and this is complicated technology. That is complicated technology involved, of course, and there will be, as you know, if you watch some of these films in the past, detachment of the rocket, of certain portions of the rocket. There you can see that detachment of certain portions of the rocket as it makes its way into space. And ultimately, once it does make its way into the rarer parts of the atmosphere, remember, this is going to be a low orbit mission. And so it will at some point move beyond the gravitational pull of the Earth, and it will start orbiting in a low orbit in India. And by the way, we're going to be speaking to several people over the course of this next half an hour. Just to give you a sense of why this is so important, we're going to be speaking to Dr. Amitabha Ghosh, who is NASA Mars scientist, and also he's a planetary scientist. We've got Dr. Pawan Goenka, who's the chairman of InSpace, which is India's very own space program. And we've also got Pawan Kumar Chandana, who's the co-founder and chief executive officer of Skyroot Aerospace. Those live visuals tell you a story, don't they? You may not understand everything that is going on, but they are momentous, to say the very least. The entire globe looking upwards and looking at these visuals, and of course this is part of the process that will take Axiom 4 to the International Space Station. Those are the parents of Shubhanshu Shukla who are watching this live, and everybody's got their fingers crossed. Oh, so you have visuals from inside the rocket as well, and everybody's watching with fingers crossed at this juncture. Those are live visuals, of course, coming through from the rocket, the 4 astronauts that are making their way all the way up to beyond, in fact, the gravitational pull of the Earth, and they will eventually make their way to the International Space Station. It's not a journey that's going to be completed very quickly. Of course, it's going to take several hours. 28 hours is what is expected to be taken for the crew of Axiom 4 to make their way to the International Space Station. And of course, once they make their way to the ISS, there will be multiple research projects that they will undertake on behalf of several countries from around the world, not least of which from India. There will be at least 60 research projects that they will take up. And there's an interesting one that even studies diabetes, believe it or not. But the rest of the projects are going to be talking about or going to be studying space-related research. Some of those projects are ISRO's very own projects. And the learnings from this mission are going to be absolutely crucial in the Gaganyaan project, which aims to take our own astronauts into space. But joining me now is Dr. Amitabha Ghosh, who, as I pointed out to you earlier, is the NASA Mars scientist. Thank you so much, Dr. Ghosh, for taking the time. The question that I'm asking is, why is Axiom 4 such a big deal, and why is there so much focus on it right now?
Well, there's very three interesting things. There are three countries which are sending the second astronaut to space. So, and India is one of them. And I think it's even more exciting for India is because our astronaut will have their own ride, which is Gaganyaan, a year or two back. So, it's like, it's different if you're driving a friend's car, but it's different if you're driving a friend's car and you're buying your own car the next year. So there's so many learnings that our astronaut could, Shubhranshu Shukla could do in that quest, which will affect his own journey a couple of years in India's own spacecraft.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken a lot of time for the second Indian to make that journey to space. And so therefore, it's very important. And you pointed out Gaganyaan, Dr. Ghosh. Let's talk about why this is so important in the context of India's own dreams of having astronauts in space and for its own mission to space. What will be done on this mission that will be a precursor to that one?
So I think, just think maybe 500 years back when the continents were being discovered. And so there were a few countries which did this, which went forward and discovered these continents, and the world became a bigger place. So now we are again at that corner where human spaceflight will make our world a bigger place. Very soon, maybe in 20 years, certainly in your lifetime and my lifetime, people will be landing on the moon. And maybe in our children's lifetime, they will start having bases on the moon. So our world is going to increase. And so there are few countries which are going to partake in this journey, the countries that have that capability. And India is going to be one of them, which is huge. And so we don't really think of it in this terms. Most countries in the world, and there are maybe 200 plus countries, right? They don't have the capability of spaceflight, robotic spaceflight, leave alone human spaceflight. So it's a huge deal. So 50 years from now, when there will be a base on the moon, or there'll be journeys maybe 100 years from now to Mars, there will be a few countries who will be part of that club. And so India will be one of them. So that's what is so very exciting and significant.
So Dr. Ghosh, to that end, let me ask you this. Why is it that there are so many satellites, so many so many flights into space by rockets that are not crewed by humans, so non-human missions, if you can call it that, and there are so few human missions? Is it a very different technology? Is it the cost involved? And so from that perspective, with these missions that are so close to each other, do we see more missions go up?
Okay, so you have asked a very good question. So imagine you were going to space compared to, say, a rover going to space to Mars, right? So if you go to space, then we have to be thinking of the pressure of the vehicle, the temperature of the vehicle, whether you have water, whether you have other facilities, you have meals. So you have to have a foolproof system, subsystem, engineering system, the power subsystem, the whatever is keeping the oxygen levels up. And then you have to think of redundancies. What if the power system fails? What is your plan then? So these things make the human missions much more engineering-wise rigorous, and sometimes maybe 4 to 10 times more expensive. So you cannot take a risk if the human is flying. You can perhaps take a risk if there's only a robot, if there's only a rover going to Mars or the moon. So that is the reason. And why do we have more non-human missions? Because most of the missions are like to put a communication satellite in orbit, to put Starlink satellites in orbit. So motive here is to really has a different goal. It's not for humans to go and do experiments in space. So there are more demand for that, and there's less demand for humans going to space station, right?
Dr. Ghosh, finally, you spoke about those experiments, and there are several, and you pointed out at the start of this conversation, there's going to be a collaborative mission, and each individual and each part of that crew is going to carry out experiments once they get to the International Space Station. Can you talk about why that is important? What kind of experiments are these?
Okay, I will answer a different question. Since you're a business channel, I will answer a different question. So we are at the cusp of space tourism happening. Okay, so we are at this, if you think of commercial spaceflight, this happened in the early 1900s, right? Very few people were in the business. The Tatas were in the business, Henry Ford was in the business, and he went bankrupt. People did not want to fly. People didn't think this was feasible. People thought, who would want to go to another continent? So now we are in this stage where Elon Musk's company has reduced the cost of spaceflight by 95%. So suddenly a cost to go to Mars is no longer astronomical. It's probably the cost of maybe $100,000 to $200,000, which you can afford in a lifetime. So we are sitting in this sector, which can be $1 trillion business in 10 to 20 years. And I think we are at this crossroads now. So people are questioning, people are saying that, well, why do this? Then if you notice, ISRO, NASA, all these are taxpayer funded entities. So they cannot do this forever. So at some point, the private sector has to come in, and they are coming in. And so you have businessmen like Jeff Bezos trying to set up a base on the moon, businessmen like Elon Musk trying to lower the cost of space travel. So if you think of in a business perspective, nobody would have said, for example, SpaceX, the valuation is now $100 billion. If you look at 20 years back, SpaceX was just starting out. It was out of a garage for almost, and no profits. And look what has happened. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So we are looking at a very different journey, and maybe even a sector opening up, which would be space tourism.
Okay, so, and on that point then, I wanted to ask you about that, but the missions that have gone, not missions, I shouldn't call them that, but the flights that have gone, almost flights of fantasy, you have suborbital flights that have taken place. What we're talking about, Axiom 4, is a low orbit mission. So do you think that private sector, SpaceX, etc., will soon have low orbit missions?
No. See, I think this is my personal opinion. I think low orbit missions will die out. Low orbit missions are 15 minutes or 10 minutes into space, and they cost like, I don't know, $200,000 or something like that. It's not interesting enough. I don't think, if you go to a ride in Disney World, it's 20 minutes, it's okay. But this is too much hassle just to go 40 miles into space and then come down. See, what's happening to Axiom 4 is what it is, how it should be. You go to space for a few days, you stay there, you do some things in space, and then you come back. Or you go to the moon and you stay a few days and you come back. So I think that is the sector which would probably in the long haul survive.
Okay, last question. Do you think that there could be an Indian company, Dr. Ghosh, that stands up to the likes of SpaceX, that is an equivalent of SpaceX, a private company at that?
Yes. So now you're talking business. So you have to think, if there are adequate number of Indians who will buy their services, then there will be an Indian company. So people go crazy that why is an Indian company doing products? Why is it not a Silicon Valley company? The markets sit in the West. If India had the market, then of course an Indian company would be able to do this. But if the markets lie in the West, if that's where people are buying, then I think it's harder. And then of course you cannot make in India. It's more complicated because of ITAR. It's the arms. This is the U.S. Technology control laws, right? So I think there are things that can happen, but one, basic thing is, why do all these product companies, why do Apple launch in the US? Because the market is there. If Apple was to just service the Indian market, or an Indian company like Apple was to evolve, the question is whether the R&D cost would be offset by the revenue that is generated out of India. I think that's the bottom line.
Okay, Dr. Ghosh, thanks so much for joining us today, and pleasure having you on the program. You know, as those visuals were playing out on the screen, one of the things that struck me was the stark difference. When you look at those touchscreen panels and you look at those astronauts sitting in that rocket heading into space, the stark difference from what Rakesh Sharma would have felt as many as 41 years back. Space technology has changed so dramatically in that time frame. And really, so much of this is related to the success of that technology, of what even Indian companies are doing. So let's give you some perspective on what Indian manufacturers take from this event. Joining me now is Pawan Kumar Chandana, who's the co-founder and chief executive officer of Skyroot Aerospace. Pawan, thanks so much as always for taking the time. And let me ask you, as an Indian manufacturer, what do you take from this?
The most inspiring event of the year, I would say. In fact, like, we were very proud that when India landed on the moon, south side of the moon, I think this is as historic as it, considering that after 41 years, an Indian is going to space, and for the first time ever, somebody is going to the space station. And an Indian, our own Indian astronaut is going to the International Space Station. So I think this is a historic moment, and it's going to inspire generations ahead. And to me personally, it's like a very inspiring moment, and it also shows the leap India is taking in the space sector. From starting from the early days where rockets were transported on cycles to now we have landed on the moon, and now we are sending our own astronauts to space.
And your own journey has been pretty much like what we're talking about, the frenetic pace of increase. It's been a takeoff. You're involved with projects with ISRO, you're working on Gaganyaan as well, and all of this, I spoke to other people in the run-up to this, and they've all said that this is a precursor to Gaganyaan. So it's exciting times for you as a company as well. Talk to me about that ecosystem and where you stand. What are you doing, and why is this exciting?
Yeah, so as Skyroot, we are a leading space startup in India. And we have launched India's first private rocket to space. That was in 2022. And we are just a few months away from our launching of commercial satellites to orbit. So very few companies in the world are launching commercial satellites to orbit, and Skyroot will be one of them. And that shows the ecosystem which we are part of. Like, for example, India has been a spacefaring nation since the 1960s. We have the ecosystem, we have the launch pads, we have the talent, we have the manufacturers, we have a great ecosystem around us in which we are leveraging all that and going very quick and building rockets from India for the world for the commercial launch of satellites. So that's what we are doing. And in fact, for example, just to give an idea, the next rocket which we are going to launch has 400 suppliers, all from India, groomed by ISRO for decades. That's the kind of ecosystem, and it will be launched from a launch pad built by India for decades. So I think that's the kind of ecosystem which we come from, and very few companies, less than 10 companies globally are doing, launching commercial satellites to orbit, and we will be one of the very early few of them. And that also a matter of pride that an Indian company is building something as deep technology as a rocket which can send satellites to orbit. And then, we're going global. So, and then space market is global, and it's almost a $400 billion business today, and is set to become $1.8 trillion by 2035. So it's a exponential growth in the global space market, and it's a great opportunity for India to take leaps and be part of the global space ecosystem.
Yeah, and Pawan, exciting times, certainly. Also, the numbers that you're talking about, absolutely large, right? And the potential is humongous. I also take heart from the fact that you have significant localization in the rockets that you're building. But I do want to ask you, as a manufacturer, the focus seemingly right now is on non-human flights or non-human missions that are sent to space. For you as a company and for your peers here in India, will that pivot to human flights, and how soon will that happen?
Absolutely, absolutely. So right now, we are taking step-by-step process. The first step is to do satellite launch, which is non-human launch. But our vision as a company is to open space for all. The vision to meet open space for all requires to actually also launch human to space. We envision a future where going to space becomes as easy as like flying on an airplane, like how we do it today, quite regularly, quite common. So we want to create a future where it becomes quite easy to go to space. Space is no longer something out of our horizon. Space is something which is regular part of our lives, whether it is for tourism, whether it is for work, whether it is for industry. In fact, space can host like great set of industries. There are materials which can only be produced in space. So there'll be a lot of economy which will be based in space in the future, and we want to be part of that journey. So the next leap for us would be, of course, though we are starting with the satellite launches, next leap would be for us to get into the human space flight. But of course, it's going to take time. And Gaganyaan program is, I think, a great leap for India, where ISRO takes that giant leap. As always, ISRO takes the first major step to create that ecosystem. So now it's creating that ecosystem through Gaganyaan program for human spaceflight. And India will become one of the very few countries which have that capability, whether it is design, manufacturing, testing, knowledge regarding human spaceflight. And I think that will be a good foundation step for all the private companies to go on top of it and then make it more commercial. So that's the whole idea. So though we are starting with non-human flights, eventually the vision is to get into human space flight down the time. Probably it would take maybe like close to 7 to 10 years from now. But I think that's a eventual evolution for us from here to there.
Yeah, that's a direction that we're taking. 10 years, I'm glad that you put a number to that. The question that I have next has to do, and since we're on a business channel, Pawan, it behooves me to ask you this. This is not a cheap business to be in. It's highly technical. The materials involved are extremely costly, and so therefore the question arises, if you need to scale this up and if you need to do more projects like this, availability of capital is going to be key. So is that something that companies that yourself will tap the public markets for? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Skyroot, we are like the privilege of being the most funded startup in the space sector. We have raised like close to $100 million of capital, which we never imagined that we would be able to do when we started off in 2018. So that shows the potential of the sector that, both domestic and global investors are backing domestic space companies. I think it's a great validation. And then I think access to capital, space is a capital intensive sector, like you mentioned, and we need like more and more capital as we go further. I think the next few years we'll be, of course, scaling with private capital. But eventually, I think, Indian public markets are very, very attractive, very bullish, and space is something which is close to the heart of every common man in India. So I think the next leap of growth after a few years will definitely be the public markets. And we would love to leverage. We want to scale the company to a level where we can be a great public company, and then from there onwards, I think it will be good growth phase, which Indian public markets can enable, is what we believe. But of course, we are all in the early phases. We have to get to that level where we can get into the public markets, and then from there, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And like I mentioned, space is a $1.8 trillion business by 2035. I think India needs to take more leverage and more opportunity in this. Right now, we as a country are 2% of the global space economy, and the government's aim is to make it 10%. And all the private space companies and startups are going to take a leap in this. And I think and the next phase of growth can come from the public markets.
Pawan, last point, and obviously in this situation, Subhashu Shukla is our blue-eyed boy here in India, and a lot of people are looking skyward and watching his journey into space. What is that one message that you would give to all of those young Indians that are dreaming of making similar journeys?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Shubhanshu is our new superhero, I would say, for India. Considering that, none of us in our generation has seen anybody launched. Of course, Mr. Rakesh Sharma, a legend, he has launched to space in 1984. But many of us are not, the young India is not born when we saw that flight. But now we see this, historic flight right before our eyes. I'm sure it is going to inspire the entire nation. As you know, a majority of our nation is below, more than 65% of India is below 35 years old. So just imagine, the kind of inspiration our generation is going to get through this flight. And I'm very, very positive that I think this is going to bring up more people into the STEM education, more people into space sector, more people to fuel our deep tech in India. I think this is going to be a legendary moment, and whatever happened, or whatever launch which has happened, gives everybody goosebumps, every enthusiast goosebumps, and is going to be in history for a long period of time. And I think the Gaganyaan program, and especially the Axiom flight today, will remain in the hearts of our young people and inspire them for decades.
All right, Pawan, on that note, thanks so much for joining me today. And what a message that was to everybody tuning in right now. If you've got dreams of contributing to India's space aspirations, then you know what to do. In fact, on that note, let me get Dr. Pawan Goenka on board. He's the chairman of InSpace, which is India's space program. And let me start by asking you, Dr. Goenka, from the Indian ecosystem standpoint, there's so much that has been created over the course of the last few years. It's a very short period, and everything on the ground is moving so frenetically fast. But give us a sense of the moving parts right now, Dr. Goenka. How quick are things moving, and what is the kind of spend that is currently underway?
Well, as you said, there are multiple moving parts, but they're all sort of beginning to come together. We, of course, have the ISRO as the granddaddy of Indian space. They have all the technology. They have done so many projects, so many missions, made India proud. They have infrastructure. But now the emerging private sector that's coming forward with technology and with capabilities that they've developed, and really, in a sense, starry-eyed ambitions for what they want to achieve in space, is bringing it all together. And InSpace's role is to ensure that these starry-eyed young professionals who are coming into the space industry are able to succeed with the help of InSpace, with the help of ISRO, and create all the infrastructure for it. And the SSLV rocket that was transferred to HAL just 2-3 days ago, the announcement. We have an EO mission coming up for Constellation that will be announced in the next couple of months. We have some satellite manufacturing happening. We have data acquisition happening. So a lot of these things we are putting together, multiple different sort of verticals of the space sector to bring together to make a whole sum of these parts. So as you said very, very aptly, and that a lot of moving parts, but they're all coming together.
Yeah. All right. Dr. Goenka, thanks so much for joining us today and for giving us a perspective. Well, it's exciting times, and it's a momentous occasion, to say the very least. We're seeing history unfold in front of our very eyes, and the promise of a future that takes humans into space is bright indeed. We get back to regular programming. It's been a pleasure bringing this to you. Do stay tuned. This is NDTV Profit.